Within a span of 18 hours, Dr. Godwin Emefiele went from the Central Bank of Nigeria governor to suspended and as of Saturday afternoon, apprehended by Nigeria's Department of State Services. Dr. Emefiele is a two-term CBN governor who has long been at the center of controversy. Under his leadership, the Central Bank of Nigeria found itself facing allegations of lacking independence and overstepping its boundaries. His tenure, which began under former President Goodluck Jonathan in 2014, was characterized by an unprecedented rise in inflation and collapse in the value of the local currency. Nigeria's headline inflation went from 8% when Emefiele first assumed office as governor in 2014 to as high as 22% as of April 2023, according to National Bureau of Statistics data. A statement from the Secretary to the Government of the Federation says his suspension was sequel to the ongoing investigation of his office and the planned reforms in the financial sector of the economy. Joining me now is economist Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise. He's also a former Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us again on Business Edge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So I think we'll start with his suspension. And while we know there are a lot of legal conversations happening around that, as it was with his predecessor, Sanusi Lamido, his tenure actually is ending this month. That is Dr. Emefiele's tenure. And so many are asking whether it was worth it to go through what we now saw as the suspension and his detention, or rather wait out the end of his tenure, given the implications and how the markets could react. So what do you make of the decision not to wait out his tenure?
Well, I think his tenure is ending next year, if I'm correct. So he still has about a year to go. But more importantly is the fact that if you look at the issues that have been raised, first, there's the issue of the investigation. And the allegations that have been put on the table are very weighty allegations. We are talking about allegations around corruption, and more importantly, allegations around economic crimes, which has implications for national security. That's the way the DSS put it. So those allegations are weighty. And if you have such an allegation, it is not possible for you to sit on your seat as a CBN governor where that kind of investigation is going on. So I don't think there is an option other than for him to step aside so that
it just seems to be one of those days where things simply do not want to align, and they call it's a star alignment. The conversation about Emefiele is one that has dominated conversations over the weekend. It was Friday night when the Secretary to the Government of the Federation under President Tinubu announced that the CBN governor had been suspended. There were some conflicting reports at that time whether or not he had been detained by the DSS, and that's Nigeria's Department of State Services. Eventually, it was revealed that he was in DSS detention, let's call it that, or under arrest. Now, the conversation is that he is reportedly being investigated for money laundering and terrorism. Now, even before the Tinubu administration came in to being and was sworn in just a few short weeks ago, it was very obvious with some of the statements that President-elect Tinubu and even then presidential candidate Tinubu had made in regards to the handling of the economy, that Emefiele was simply not going to serve under the Tinubu administration. But beyond serving under the Tinubu administration, there had been many who had been calling for an investigation into his time at the CBN, and those simply saying, just decide if you want a new CBN governor and let's move on from there. But the events of the weekend show that there's much more to this story, particularly from the Tinubu administration. Now, the former CBN governor faced two recessions in about 5 years under the Buhari administration. He also faced the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which simply stretched Nigeria very, very much. Now, the conversations around those depended on whether you looked at it in terms of external factors, external global headwinds, or the internal factors that Nigeria had been dealing with for a number of years. And those internal factors, we saw the closure of borders, which was, of course, a decision made by former President Buhari at that point in time. And if we can get up some of the things that happened under the leadership of Godwin Emefiele. We'll look at some of those issues as they have come about. Now, when you look at some of those things, there have been a number of issues. One of the latest issues that Godwin Emefiele faced during his time at the CBN was the issue of the Naira redesign policy. Now, the Naira redesign policy is, of course, coming off the back of the cashless withdrawal limits policy as well. There was a number of conversations surrounding that. It was a very difficult time for Nigerians across the country. It was a difficult time for businesses. Many businesses did unfortunately have to fold up. People had to let other people go, so there's unemployment that was also attached to that. But if we could get that list where we look at some of the activities that happened under Godwin Emefiele. You also had the situation where he banned the bureau de change operators. We also had the anchor borrower scheme as well. There is also the ban on cryptocurrencies. It's been an interesting administration serving under two presidents. First with President Goodluck Jonathan, and then again serving under President Buhari, who then of course gave him another tenure elongation, as you might say, saying that he should stay put. Apparently the president, former President Buhari, was then very happy with the work that Godwin Emefiele was doing. But a lot of Nigerians and analysts had their issues. Emefiele was often referred to as the emperor in the banking and financial sectors, and many say that's because of the imperious nature in manner in which he conducted activities at the CBN, a lot of times without consultation. Talking about a lack of consultation, during the time of the Naira redesign policy, we heard from the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, and that was of course then Dr. Zainab Ahmed, who said that she in fact was not consulted when it came to the Naira redesign policy. But the CBN governor then came out to say that he had done the right things, he had followed protocol, and he was in fact well within his rights and his responsibilities to do what he did. Now, from two recessions, the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, fuel crisis as well, there are many issues that the CBN governor has faced in his time. We also saw a number of things. In 2015, the CBN began to pursue pro-agricultural policies, which turned out to be quite controversial. One of such policies was the anchor borrower scheme. His time at governor also coincided with an increasing lack of transparency at the bank. Many would be surprised to hear that the Apex Bank has not published its financial results since 2018. So there are a lot of criticisms of the CBN, and many saying that there was a lack of independence, a lack of standing apart between him and the Buhari administration, and also overstepping of boundaries, particularly when it comes to the constitutional independent role of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Let me see, do we have Dr. Muda Yusuf back with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
All right, so Dr. Yusuf, let me pick up from this point about lack of independence and overstepping of boundaries. There are people who pointed to the Anchor Borrows program, pointed to banning cryptocurrencies, a conversation that involves Nigeria's STEC. But do you think the criticisms about lack of independence, overstepping boundaries, going beyond what the CBN was meant to do, were those criticisms justified?
Well, they were justified to some extent. Ideally, the whole idea of the independence of the central bank is to ensure that there is no interference in the policy process of the Apex Bank. Now, talking now about core monetary policy issues. But again, when an individual has power or an institution has powers, it depends on how well or how effectively or how transparently those powers are exercised. So the issue with the regime of Godwin Emefiele was the quality of the exercise of powers. Because if you have powers, you can exercise it positively. It can also be negative. But the whole idea of independence is not a bad idea. But nobody is an island. He was crossing quite a number of boundaries. He was not engaging the stakeholders. He was not engaging with the key economic agencies in government. He was relating only with the president. You know, and again, it's a matter of concern because he is the CBN governor. There's a board that normally should also exercise some oversight over the activities of the CBN. But he's also the chairman of the board. So those powers, I think, were a bit excessive. There was no proper room for checks and balances. Unfortunately, the National Assembly also did not help matters. For some reasons, they were not able to exercise some control, effective oversight over what the CBN was doing. So it was a major challenge. I think it has to do more with the person rather than the policies or the structure of governance. I think that for me is the big issue.
Okay.
I'm talking about all these challenges that it's facing now. Of course, there's a criminal element which we cannot wish away. If the DSS has come up, and you can see quite a long list of allegations, these allegations are very weighty. So it is only proper that he's excused from that position so that a thorough investigation can be done. We are talking of economic crimes, we are talking of terrorism. I mean, a thorough investigation has to be done. And of course, he has to be given fair hearing. But that cannot be done while he's still sitting there as the governor of the CBN. That is one. Secondly, the current administration has a very clear trajectory, clear path of reforms that it wants to pursue. At the inauguration of the new president, he stated clearly that he wanted a unified exchange rate. Godwin Emefiele, I mean, CBN under Godwin Emefiele is not well disposed to the promotion of a unified exchange rate. The president also talked about his concern and resentment about the way the Naira redesign policy was carried out. As we speak today, I've not seen any sign of remorse on the part of the CBN governor concerning the hardship, the pains, the agony, and the trauma that Nigerians went through on account of that Naira redesign policy. So for me, they don't seem to be even on the same page from day one. Because if, as a president, you have a vision that you want to achieve, and you have a CBN governor who is not exactly on the same page with you, at least for the past 7 years or so, we know where he stood on all of these issues. So how do you expect him to drive your vision, to drive the reforms? So there's already a compatibility issue, as far as the reforms that the president wants to promote, the new president wants to promote is concerned. So going forward, I don't think the prospect of their working together is that bright. And to make matters worse, he was involved in partisan politics. That is even extremely, extremely unbecoming. He went to take the form for APC primaries. We saw all sorts of support groups supporting him. He went to court that he wants to remain as CBN governor and still participate in APC primaries. Those things were very ridiculous. So when you have all this baggage, it's very, very difficult to make a case for him to remain on that seat. So those are the concerns that I have. And of course, there are a lot of challenges with the stakeholders. We know what the multiple exchange rates has done to the economy. We know the transparency problems it caused. We know all the corruption problem around foreign exchange, the liquidity crisis.
So, Dr. Yusuf, Dr.
Yes.
Yusuf, let me come in here because you've gone to where my next question is, and that's about some of the several activities and policies that came up under Godwin Emefiele's leadership. We talked about, I mentioned earlier, the latest, which was the Naira redesign policy. There was the ban on cryptocurrencies. There was the introduction of the e-Naira. There's also the ban on bureau de change operators. You've also mentioned the operation of a multiple exchange rate. There's also the directive on one of the world's highest cash reserve ratios, and many people say it's actually the highest in the world. There's also the CBN's loans to the government, aka Ways and Means, and that jumped from 790 billion naira in May of 2015 to about 23.7 trillion. In terms of his policies, because we have to look at the past 2 tenures that he had. And again, there were 2 recessions. There was the COVID-19 pandemic. There was also there is the Russia-Ukraine war and the effects that it's bringing. There's global economic headwinds that we're feeling. When you look at his policies, which ones do you think possibly did the most harm to Nigerians? And was there a policy or 2 or 3 in which Godwin Emefiele got it right?
Well, the policies under him that did the most damage, I will single out 2 together. The Naira redesign policy and the foreign exchange policy. Those 2 did a lot of harm to this economy. The Naira redesign policy was perhaps the worst of the policies that we had under the Buhari administration because of the impact it had, especially on the vulnerable segments of the society. The distortions it created, the hardship it created, the fact that citizens have to be using their money to buy their own currency. And it paralyzed the entire distributive trade system. Because currency is an instrument of, it's a means of exchange. It's a payment instrument. When you come in the name of currency redesign, and you mop up almost 70% of the cash in the economy. As if that was not bad enough, there were appeals from the citizens, there was an appeal from the National Assembly, there was an appeal by the governors, there was a Supreme Court judgment, and yet all of these were not complied with. Until we got the second Supreme Court judgment, until Labour now came into it to issue a threat of a strike, by which time a lot of damage had been done. Some citizens even lost their lives. So that was an extremely bad policy and very, very insensitive, not only of him, but also the president, because he kept saying that it is the president that gave him approval, according to the CBN Act. So the president himself was culpable. So we expected an unreserved apology from both of them to Nigerians for the harm they did to the economy and to the people. Then on the foreign exchange, now we have seen an unprecedented premium, what we call arbitrage, between the official rate and the parallel market rate. And it created a room for a lot of corruption. How do you justify you have 460 to the dollar in one window, you have over 700 in another window? So those who are in arbitrage were just making money freely. They had a field day. The real entrepreneurs could not access foreign exchange in the official window. Many of them had to fall on the parallel market. There was acute liquidity challenge in the foreign exchange market. Airlines could not repatriate their proceeds. Foreign investors could not repatriate their proceeds. You can imagine the damage to the reputation of the country. That is why we are not able to attract inflows, either for foreign direct investment or for foreign portfolio investors. Even the exporters were lamenting. They couldn't freely bring in their export proceeds because of the policy. And yet there was clamor, there was appeal that this policy should be changed. The CBN governor was adamant. So those two policies, I think, created a whole lot of problems for the economy, and they compounded our foreign exchange crisis. The situation couldn't have been as bad with our foreign exchange problem or the exchange rate if you had a regime where at least there could be inflow of capital into the economy. But how many people will bring in their capital at 460? Bring in foreign exchange at 460? When if you are going out, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to take it out at 460. So that was why the current administration under President Tinubu was very clear that we need to move away from that regime into a unified exchange rate regime.
All right.
Then you have the Anchor Borrowers Program. It's neither here nor there. But in terms of the positives, because we cannot say that everything he did was bad. We had a stability, at least in the banking system. No bank went under during his tenure. We didn't see the failure of any bank. The bank that showed signs of weakness, there was room for mergers, there was room for acquisition. So no depositor lost money under him. And some of the development finance initiatives also helped some of our investors in the manufacturing sector. At least through BOI, quite a number of industries were able to access the development finance funds under the intervention for particularly the real sector support facility. A number of industries got it, although many SMEs could not access those funds. But you must recognize that some people got it. So those are some of the positives that we can say about it.
time is not with us, and I need to really put this in because we haven't been able to have the full conversation as I would like. So just in 1 minute, we have an acting CBN governor now in former Deputy Governor of Operations Directorate, Folasho Shunubi, and we don't know whether he's going to continue that position substantively. We know that Godwin Emefiele was in acting position when Governor Sanusi Lamido was then suspended by former President Goodluck Jonathan. But beyond that, what kind of CBN governor does Nigeria need right now? Just give me that in 1 minute. The kind of person, mentality that we're looking for, particularly at the time and place that the Nigerian economy finds itself. 1 minute, sir.
Well, we need somebody who has very good knowledge of economics and economic management, and who has an idea of the implication of monetary policies for the entire economy. We need somebody who has a listening ear, who will engage with stakeholders, who will not be an emperor or who will not be overbearing, who will engage with stakeholders across all the sectors. And we also need somebody who will give some room for the banking system to be able to play their role in financial intermediation, because the current tightening of monetary policy is choking the banking system. You have a CRR of 32.5, you have MPR of 18.5. It's one of the highest in the world. Almost 50% of deposits have been warehoused in CBN. How will they function? How will they support the economy with credit? So we need all this CBN government that understands the role of the banking system, especially with respect to financial intermediation. So those are some of the critical attributes that I think we should get from the new CBN governor.
All right, Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you so much. It's a conversation we know that's going to continue, particularly with the allegations against the now suspended CBN governor. And I know we'll probably be talking to you in the course of the week as more details come out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tolu.
All right. Thank you. And even with some technical difficulties, we're able to get to some of the meat. But as I said, it's a developing story that broke over the weekend. There's likely going to be reactions from the market today as well. We saw the reactions with President Tinubu's inaugural speech. There will be reactions to the removal of the CBN governor as well. And it's a story that's developing that we will continue, of course, to follow. That's where we have to wrap things up because of time here on Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. We have an app, we have a website, and we're, of course, available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Do have a very pleasant day.